some of our younger workers, they're more than happy to come in. They want to come in, but not just for a tick box exercise, not just to be sat behind a desk. You know, what is the purpose of their commute?
So it has risk for gender equality in terms of pay, but also it depends how the cultural regarding this kind of flexible work, how a narrative towards these people's use of this.
I think putting yourself in a space that you can fully thrive is also a good reason to be in that office environment. Hello and welcome Shiyu and Clair to People First, the Young Careers podcast. I'm your host Jordan, and today we're discussing quite a controversial topic, and that's returning to the office and sort of office mandates. For our listeners, I'm joined by Shiyu Yuan, Research Fellow at King's College London, and Clair Dartnell, my colleague and Head of People and Culture at Brook Street. To kick us off, I would love to know, first of all, if you could just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself. I'm going to come to you first, Shiyu.
Yes, so I'm Shiyu. I'm currently a PhD candidate at University of Kent, but I'm also a researcher at the King's Global Institute for Women's Leadership. And I'm doing a lot of research on flexible working, especially I'm looking at men's working from home, how this will impact families and career and gender equality. And interestingly, because I go from my undergraduate master directly to PhD, I don't really specifically do full-time job. I did quite a lot of internship. I worked for HR consultancy company during my master. So I'm basically helping to design of some kind of for the cultural building event for the company, and we can help other companies to manage the team stuff. But it's not very longer term. So yeah, but it's very fun for me to going through this human resource field and also the labor market.
Yeah, and listen, if you're ever wanting to foray into a full-time job, I know many people, many recruitment consultants that can help you.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you, and I can't wait to hear more about what you get up to in just a minute. Claire, I know you, but I would love if you could tell the listeners a little bit about your career journey, first of all, and what you do now.
Yeah, so for me, I've done over 20 years now in recruitment. So started in Office Angels actually, and was working as a recruitment consultant, and I've been with the group now for 20 years and managed strategic clients, and now more recently moved into people and culture. So that's just really about building a platform for our people to grow their careers and then give them a voice and, you know, make Mondays a better place to be, not get that Sunday feeling.
Which you do absolutely brilliantly.
Thank you.
Today's episode, I mentioned, is about returning to work and office mandates and things like that. Can you paint a picture at the moment of what you're seeing whenever it comes to companies bringing their workforce back to the office?
Actually, if you read these headlines online, you feel like everybody now in the UK are dragged back to office. But in our data, we shows there's no massive return to office mandates. For example, we found in late 2024, there's over 40% of workers in the UK actually can working from home once a week, at least once a week. And then there's also over 25% of workers now can working from home very regularly, for example, more than 3 days a week. But we do see that nowadays workers are not able to working as often as in the pandemic period. They're working on more like 2 days at home or 1 day at home and 3 to 4 days in the office. This is the most popular one. And there's a lot of big name companies on the news shows like Amazon, JP Morgan, and also Booz. They're rolling all the flexibility back. But yeah, the majority employers, we found they're actually increasing the days for a lot of, because before a lot of employers doesn't provide any home working days, but now they're providing 1 day, and this average home working days is slightly increasing in the UK. So yeah, there's no massive return, but definitely different among different employers.
Have you seen like attitudes to working from home or working from the office or any sort of mix? Have you seen that change amongst the workforce or amongst employers?
Yes, that's definitely true, because we did the research on this to looking at how employees from different socioeconomic groups, how they think of return to office mandates, this kind of 5 days in the office. the very beginning of 2022, actually we see more people would like to comply to this policy. But as time goes on, we see actually increasingly a lot of employees saying they would start looking for new jobs or they would quit immediately if forced back 5 days in office, especially women. And these with younger children, they're more likely to push back for that. But we also found that actually fathers as well. Increasingly now, fathers saying they will quit immediately if they're forced back to office. And in our study, we show that younger workers actually are more likely than older workers to push back for this kind of 5 days in office kind of mandate. So yeah, there's quite a wide acceptance for this kind of arrangement, but definitely there's still a lot of employers may not be completely saying they will trust for using this kind of arrangement, because KPMG report found there's over 60% of employers would like to everybody go back to office by end of 2026, but it's may not actually happen because employees also resist to it and depends on different kind of settings. Yeah, so this attitude is changing, but still we are seeing this two different kind of attitude happening.
That's a really good overview, and that seems for us really, really well. I'm going to come to you, Claire, next. What do we actually mean by flexible working, right? What is it in its definition, and is this a new term? Is this a new idea just post-COVID, or what have you sort of seen in your career?
Yeah, I think flexible working it means something different to many different people. I mean, it can be working from home full time. It can be flexi hours. It can be condensed work week. But it really does depend on the individual. It could just mean I want to choose when I work, not where. So I think that's something we're certainly seeing. It's not the same thing to everybody. And I think pre-pandemic, it was very much a privilege to work from home. It was a little bit of a perk, where now I feel like we're seeing that expectation come through from people wanting to work from home and feeling like they should be able to. And I think for organisations, it's just about reconfirming what the expectation is, being transparent, why you need to be in the office. Because I think, some of our younger workers, they're more than happy to come in. They want to come in, but not just for a tick box exercise, not just to be sat behind a desk. What is the purpose of their commute? Yeah. So I think if we can really just, realign what's the purpose of coming into the office, I think that would then help. Yeah. So, and it shouldn't be seen as a punishment. I think that's what you get the general feeling of, that I'm being punished because I've got to go into the office.
And I think that does relate back to what you mentioned in your research. It's almost like we see these headlines. It's hysteria, it's like if everyone else thinks that we shouldn't be doing this, so I don't want to do it, and that sort of thing. And just to, I guess, frame for listeners, when we mention returning to the office, this isn't just after, flexible working over COVID. Making a flexible working request can be to care for an elderly parent. It can be to have some, maybe a bereavement leave or things like that as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to move on, and I want to touch on something that you mentioned, because I know you spoke about, for example, young females who are the main caregiver to their children, but also males that are parents too. Which workers would you say are most vocal for their support of flexible working? And is there any research actually measuring this?
I think, for example, our study shows that definitely working moms are one of the big fan of this kind of flexible working, because our research shows that now the majority, over 55% of women by end of 2024 say they would start to look for new jobs if they're forced back 5 days in office. And also, actually, I would also suggest disabled workers or those people with mental health conditions, because working from home, for example, really allow them to avoid commuting and work in an environment that they could already meet their needs and don't have to face this kind of discriminations. So they would definitely be very supportive for this kind of arrangement. But also, I would say, compared to older generations, especially Gen Z and the millennial workers, they are also more advocate for flexibility, but doesn't mean they want to say fully remote, but they really value have the opportunity to working from home. Because there's another survey did this year by CV Genius. They found out actually More Gen Z and millennials said they would willing to have a pay cut just for guaranteed remote work opportunities. So a lot of workers, they definitely be more vocal for this kind of flexible working opportunities. But yeah, it depends on different reasons.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And so, as a Gen Zer, I think, or maybe like on the cusp, right? Lots of people say that Gen Z at the minute are too lazy to return to work. I think this is obviously a conversation that has lots of nuances to it.
Yeah.
From my perspective, in my career, I always really like to be visible, you know. I was always quite confident that maybe my qualifications or my skill set wouldn't have been at par with others in my team. But I always knew that my relationship building skills were way better, right?
Yeah.
You know, I knew that if I could get in front of people, I could make them like me, and I cannot do that. I find I cannot do that as effectively behind teams, and that's me. That's a personal thing. I've actually found being quite visible in the office has actually helped me throughout my career. I don't really fear senior stakeholders because I see them a lot. Yeah. I make coffees with our marketing director. You know, it's those sorts of things that I think have actually benefited me. I'm always saying to people in our younger workforce, go for the coffees, go for the lunches, chat to people, go out for that drink after work, because you don't know how those sort of people that you're connecting with can help you later on in your career. And I think what I would love to maybe turn to you guys and ask is, what do you think the benefits are? What are like the good things and moving away from that negativity about being in the office and being embedded in that culture? Do you want to
I mean, for me, I think, you know, we shouldn't underestimate the power of building those relationships. And I genuinely believe, I think you have to have a purpose. You have to have a reason to go into the office. And I think individuals need to create their own benefits. You know, just coming into London today, just, you know, you miss those water cooler moments when you're working remote. And, you know, working from home can be a lonely place.
Yeah.
You know, and I think certainly if you're starting out in your career, just hearing conversations, understanding how somebody dealt with a situation, you're not going to hear that at home.
Mm-mm.
And I think as well, you know, just with regards to creating belonging, you know, it's really difficult. And I still don't think that we've managed to really understand how we absolutely bring remote teams into that belonging.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, it is a mixture, but for me it's all about building those relationships and being seen. I don't necessarily think being remote you're invisible, but you have to have the intention, you know, to get out there and get your face seen. And like you said, you know, just walking past somebody and having a coffee with them makes a massive difference.
100%. And I've been quoted in this podcast before saying 1,000 times, how can someone disrespect me or cross me if I know what colour your sister's curtains are in her living room? Do you know what I mean? How I find people will be more inclined to be nice to you if you have a personal relationship with them, or they'll work with you in a difficult situation, or those sorts of things, or maybe they'll just be a little more tolerant because you have that set relationship. And the next question is, and we're talking about it, is what are the top benefits of being in the office today for younger workers? And I do think it is that belonging piece that you touched on. It's feeling a part of something. When I started my career in marketing and recruitment, I worked on a bay. I sat at the end. I had 10 of the best recruiters in Belfast sat in front of me. And I knew that if I had done a little bit of great content, or I had, you know, posted a nice piece of marketing, I could physically hear the phones ring, you know? I could hear them ring. I could hear, like, I've saw this, I want to apply. And you see the consultants they're making money, they're placing, they're doing good things. And I got to sit and watch that unfold. And I know that sounds like maybe like such a small example, but that idea of like feeling a part of something was probably, and that momentum and feeling like that necessary part of the cog was probably why I've stayed in recruitment for so long. I like helping people. And I think when you're in the position, or if you're in the office and you're having those water cooler think stations, you know, Claire, you could come to me tomorrow and say, could you help me with this project, which I'm going to give me exposure, and I wouldn't have it if I didn't see Claire. Bringing it back to your research here, if we're looking at young people, what do you think that companies are doing well to entice people to want to come back into that culture of the office?
I think one of the most important approach a lot of companies currently doing is trying to really arrange these in-office days properly. For example, rather than saying let these workers go to office, but they don't really do some kind of important thing. They arrange social events on the day. They arrange very well these very important meetings, and they trying to do all of these kind of mentorship on the day. It's really about how you can really manage all of these important things to cut this very unnecessary kind of bureaucratic process and trying to really make people in the office enjoy the most benefit of it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of companies currently doing hybrid working models. So one of the day they call anchor days. Everybody go into the office in this 1 day or 2 days, and it's super interesting because they arrange very well for different meetings happening, and then everybody later go for a drink together, and they will potentially also have a very nice social event. This kind of thing really, really can make people more willing to go to office.
Yeah, I agree. Next question, and I'm going to come to you for this one, is and be honest, really honest here, do you think that there was a point, maybe if we talk about over the last 5 years, over COVID period, do you think there was a point where working from home or working remotely could hinder one's career progression in an organisation?
I think it can. I think you have to be intentional in your approach. If you are working full time from home, you need to be visible. You need to be seen. So, turn your camera on. Arrange a virtual coffee.
Yeah.
Have those connections and build that network. But I think it's also for our people managers as well. They need to create that space for those people that do work remotely to shine. So I think it's down to the individual, but it's also down to the manager, because yes, you could be forgotten. And if you're happy to, not be seen, then, the value that you're bringing to the company won't be seen, and you won't be promoted on or move forward on your career.
Yeah, I think as well, I'm conscious this is a young careers podcast, and for those who are listening that maybe in for example, like a graduate program, or a apprenticeship program, in my opinion, I could be wrong. I'll be questioned. You need to be on the job,
yes,
and
absolutely.
that's for me. I would want to be there. I don't think you get that same level of camaraderie or knowledge by looking at something virtually, especially if you're in something like a site-heavy business where you can actually see things, parts being made. We look after a lot of automotive clients, and maybe there is rooms where a graduate could be working from home, but you're not seeing what the work you're doing is actually directly impacting.
Absolutely.
Would you agree, Claire?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point, because, yes, like I said, it seems like it's an expectation now that people work from home, but we just have to change the narrative to why it's a positive thing to be included in the office or that working environment. And for me, it's about that collaboration.
Yeah.
Collaboration, connectivity.
Yeah.
And, the energy that brings, like I said, can be a very lonely place sitting in your living room working.
Yeah. And I know you're a researcher. Do you remember, do you know the number of how many hours we spend at work?
How many hours?
In our lifetime we spend at work. Isn't it something like 90,000?
I haven't really calculated, but I know people spend most of the time either in sleeping and work. That's basically you do.
And again, I'm going to quote some research, some spear, but we spend more time with our managers, our line managers, than most of us ever will with a life partner, in and outside of work. So you want to create a nice environment for you. And, I remember over COVID times doing that walk from my bedroom, 2 steps from my bed to my desk in my bedroom, was soul destroying. Not a lot of us are set up that we can have things like a luxury of a home office and things. So I think putting yourself in a space that you can fully thrive is also a good reason to be in that office environment because you can see other, you hear the phone ring, you can see other people doing things, you have more of a get up and go, and you don't need to motivate yourself every day. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think that, the commute can be seen as a positive as well. It gives you a chance to reflect on the day on your way home, but then on the way in, you can really start thinking about what your day looks like, and it prepares you, because you're right. If you're working from home, your commute's like down the stairs.
Yeah.
And, and then you find, you're sat at your desk for 8 hours.
Yeah.
You've not actually moved. And then there's blurred boundaries. So you become available constantly. So you have to be quite strict to say, it's whatever the time is that you finish, I'm finishing now.
Yeah.
And, and that's not necessarily down to managers or organisations. That has to be a personal thing. You have to be quite strong on that. And I think we did see a lot of that through the pandemic, where people were just working such long hours because, one, they had nothing else to do, I guess, but I think those habits have continued.
Yeah, I agree. And you don't have, we obviously make coffees and things like that, but where is the switch off? Was a question I asked myself all the time whenever I was working remotely, is like, how am I going from like you're working in your bedroom to now you're enjoying your bedroom as your own safe space, But I could talk about that for hours. What I want to really come back to is something that I have read around the topic of the gender pay gap, and if working from home or remote working can impact that, or it has any effect on that. Is that something you would be able to tell us about?
Yes.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the gender pay gap, because it depends on which flexible working we're talking about. Because, for example, the current gender pay gap in the UK and a lot of other countries, mainly because one of the reasons because women tend to work in part-time work. And because they're working part-time work, and which is associated low payment, low status, low protection, so they generally will find there's a gender pay gap between them. For working from home and other flexi-time work, there's more mixed picture for this. For example, there's research found, for example, by Professor Hee-Jun Chang. Her research shows that when women, they're working from home or using flexi time, they actually manage to stay full time, manage to stay their previous workload, but definitely they may face intensified work-family conflict. They have to manage both full-time work and also childcare responsibilities. But on the other hand, if working from home or flexible working is considered only by these people with caring responsibility, or like women and caregivers, they using it, they potentially working from home and flexi time, just like part-time work, they may eventually get more kind of hinder career progression, career penalty, because we assume these people using flexible working will then end up doing more housework, childcare, rather than doing work. So it has risk for gender equality in terms of pay, but also it depends how the cultural regarding this kind of flexible work, how a narrative towards these people's use of this. Yeah, so I think it depends.
Yeah. That was great what you mentioned, and I think it is something that people need to obviously consider, and a conversation that needs to be happening. The gender pay gap is not a new conversation. Yeah. It's not, but I don't think it's spoken enough about how things like that are actually impacting it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I actually read something, and I'm not going to quote where I read it, but it was because I genuinely can't remember, but it actually stated that there's no female living today that will be alive when we have there's no longer a gender pay gap, and that was really quite shocking.
It's shocking. Yeah, it is shocking. It's crazy to think about it, honestly. Like no one in our generation is ever going to see that through. And I understand I'm in a very privileged position speaking here to two women, but it's just not something that I can physically comprehend in my head. Do you know what I mean? I don't know whether they're going to keep that in the recording, but I wanted to say it anyway. If we can't come into the office full time, there's not, our business isn't set up, we have our own personal needs, those sorts of things. How can we still network? How can we still stay connected? Is there anything that you've seen in the world with other businesses? And then I'll come to us if that's okay, because I know how we stay connected. Yeah. But is there anything that you've seen in the market or you've seen in your research that's where companies are helping their employees connect?
So I would say a lot of companies, they try, even though they're not able to everybody come to office, they're trying to also arrange a lot of hybrid events.
Mm-hmm.
People who can come, they would come in person, and who can't, they would trying to do it online. So they would not exclude those people who are working from home, but trying to embrace them as much as possible. And another way for individual, if you're working remotely, it's always to remember you can not only network in person, you can network in LinkedIn, a lot of these kind of digital platforms, you can try and make most use of them. And I also like people currently, a lot of companies, they're trying to do every week or every 2 weeks, they will have the online stand-up kind of meeting, and this can be really helpful.
Yeah.
So I think if people who working from home, then it's really important to both themselves proactively join this kind of online event, but also the company should provide these kind of opportunities for them also join hybridly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you have any thoughts? I mean, even speaking about Manpower Group, you know, like, how do you think it's a good way for people to stay connected or network or those sorts of things?
I think, like I said before, you know, you've got to get your camera on, you've got to start reaching out to people. I think, you know, going to, even if you think outside of Manpower Group, going to local business events, you know, build your own network amongst your community, because that's local to you.
Yeah.
You know, we have so many networks that you can join in Manpower Group. And again, you're going to be meeting people like the Bright Network. You'll meet people that you would maybe not have connected with before.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you'll build those relationships. And that's when, you know, you'll find when you're like, you've had new jobs, you know who to reach out to because you've come across them in whatever way it was. So I think you've just got to be intentional with your actions. I think it's harder when you're remote, but it's not impossible.
Two things I want to pick up on that you mentioned is external networks. I've recently discovered a young queer professional meetup in Soho that people go to, gay guys that are gay, or women, sorry, I'm being exclusionary, queer folk of all shapes and sizes and of everyone in that alphabet soup that I love can go and chat about what it means to be queer in a corporate space and those sorts of things. I didn't realise things like that existed, and that's outside obviously of the company. There is lots of things like that, but I am a huge champ of whatever you call them within your organisation, whether it's an affinity network, a BRG or anything like that. Myself and Claire both spearheaded our respective networks, and that's how we became friendly. Yes. So I also have advanced my career from being a part of an affinity network. You know, you, like Claire said, you meet people, you come across people. It's a good way to stay connected. I have found over my career that not every manager in a larger organisation promotes the large organization. Not everyone, you know, maybe points to you about those sorts of things that exist. If have a look, go on your company internet, see what exists out there. Is it that there's a coffee morning? Is it that there is X, Y, and Z? Go to it. That's what I would recommend. If you can't get into the office, please try and make sure you're finding some sort of level of human connection with people that don't do the same job as you. And that's something I would always recommend to people. I've recently just taken on a new job, and my main stakeholder is a person from my club, you know? So it's always good. And it goes back to, I can be a real person with her in my job. And this is shout out Patra if you're listening, but I know that I can go to her and say, what do you want from me? Rather than have to impress or to have any of that grey area around a new stakeholder. I'm an advocate of whatever way you can connect, whether that's in the office, whether you're remote. It's all for me about the connection, that real human connection that we all crave. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a young worker starting out in today's hybrid working world?
I would say if you looking for hybrid working or you're working hybrid model, trying to be firstly proactive, because you're a young worker, definitely you wanted this kind of opportunity to in-person learning. But also young workers, I know they like flexibility, so also trying to make your own working place more personalized and productive for yourself, because we know the boundaries can be really hard to define. So it's really about, you have to get used to this arrangement and trying to show you're productive. Yeah. Of course, there will definitely be difficulties around. You will face barriers, but conversation with your managers to tell them you actually be productive and show them that your outcomes, your outputs can be a really good way to deal with their potential bias towards your outcomes and productivity. Yeah, I think open conversation with the managers and trying to be proactive during these anchor days.
Yeah, great. Anything from you, Claire?
I think for me, it's I said it previously, but don't underestimate the power of building those relationships. And I think getting into the office and starting that right from the beginning is really, really important. And be intentional with your days in the office. Make sure that you're not just sitting behind your laptop. Get involved. And have your own benefits for going into the office.
Agree.
And get involved in the company culture.
Yeah.
And that's where your belonging will come.
Agree. And something that we haven't really touched upon, but there is lots of organisations that are fully remote. That is in their that is their operation. Something I find is, if your manager allows or, you have no security permissions, go to a cafe, go to a shared working space. There's loads of, I live in Hackney, there's hundreds of them, It feels like you're working with colleagues, and if you're in that position, you also have the opportunity to meet other people that are maybe in a like-minded industry than you. And you never know, you're making correct connections for your career. So I think we've had a lovely, wonderful conversation around the office and returning to work. Is there anything that either of you haven't covered that you would want to talk about or you'd want to mention?
I think, because my work is looking at men's working from home, I was just thinking potentially we could, for flexible working, especially working from home, if provided, rather than frame it as something purely for work-life balance, you'll be also interested to see how this kind of arrangement to impact the performance and the company's outputs, especially encouragements use of this arrangement, so it can potentially lead into less bias regarding this arrangement. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you. Shiyu, where can our listeners follow you?
But they can follow me in LinkedIn. Just type my name, and so they can easily find me.
That's great. And Claire, what about you?
For anyone internal, just reach out on Teams and anything people and culture.
I promise she's really friendly. She's really, really friendly. That is the end of today's episode. Thank you so much, Claire and Shiyu, for joining me today. I really, really, really love that conversation. For our listeners, as always, if you're in the market for a new role, why not check out Brook Street online? There may just be a dream job waiting there for you. Please follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you, and see you later.